The Simpsons is constantly one of the best shows on television. However, The Simpsons does not always make a whole lot of sense. How can years pass and no one age? How can it continue to make topical pop culture references if everything should be taking place in 1991? There is a possible way in which the series could be explained, allowing for these inconsistencies. What if Homer Simpson had been in a coma since season 2? This video attempts to make the case that the coma theory is a conceivable explanation for the entire show. Number 10. The initial injury. In the Simpsons episode, Bart the Daredevil, Homer attempts to jump Springfield Gorge on a skateboard. Homer's leap is done completely by accident. Homer is successful in convincing Bart not to try to leap the gorge on a skateboard. Bart spends most of the episode doing escalating stunts in order to prove that he was a real daredevil. Homer steps on the skateboard rolls down a hill and makes the leap. For a moment, it looks as if Homer might actually jump over the Springfield Gorge on the skateboard, but at the last second, Homer drops to the bottom of the gorge. The attempt to get Homer to the hospital results in Homer hitting his head multiple more times. These head injuries only added to the initial injuries of the fall. In the real world, the fall in Springfield Gorge would have caused severe brain trauma and significant skull fractures. The trauma to the brain could have easily put Homer in a coma. Comas which last for a decade are rare. However, a coma lasting decades is certainly not impossible. Eduardo Ibarra was in a coma for 42 years before passing away. Long-term coma patients can also wake up for brief periods before falling back into a coma. Firefighter Donald Herbert spoke to his family for nearly 14 hours after a decade in a coma. Herbert then fell back into the coma and he never recovered. The hypothesis that Homer Simpson could be in a coma for a quarter century and have brief periods of lucidity is completely conceivable in the real world. Number 9. The Al Jean theory. Al Jean has been with The Simpsons since the beginning of the show. Jean was made a showrunner in the 3rd season of The Simpsons. A showrunner is someone who's responsible for all aspects of the show's production and direction. Jean is also frequently credited as a writer on The Simpsons. When Al Jean gives a theory on how The Simpsons should end, the theory should not be treated as simply as some crazy fan on the internet. When doing press for The Simpsons marathon, Jean gave a hint as to how he would like to see The Simpsons end. Specifically, he said that The Simpsons should end with the family getting ready for a Christmas pageant. The Christmas pageant would be the same pageant featured in the first ever episode of The Simpsons, which was titled Simpsons Roasting on an Open Fire. This ending would make The Simpsons loop all the way back to the beginning of the series. If the Christmas pageant can be revisited at the end of the series, revisiting the jump over Springfield Gorge is not really a huge leap of faith. Number 8. What state is Springfield in? The Simpsons creator Matt Groening seems to reveal the location of Springfield as being in Oregon. However, a careful reading of the interview reveals that he states Springfield was named after Springfield, Oregon. Groening also cites the town in Father Knows Best as an influence for Springfield. He also borrowed the names of his own family members for the names of The Simpsons. The important distinction is that citing Springfield, Oregon as the influence does not definitively state that the show takes place in Oregon. The age-old question of what state is Springfield in may actually be a truly metaphysical one. The term state can cover a vast variety of meanings. The question what state is Springfield in could easily refer to a state of mind or consciousness as a political territory. If Homer is in a coma, then the question could refer to a state of consciousness. Springfield state is a constant topic of discussion for fans of The Simpsons. However, virtually no one argues that Springfield state is actually, in fact, a state of mind. Most all of the travels which we have seen in The Simpsons could be how Homer Simpson subconsciously views the world after his accident. Number 7. The Futurama Connection. If you've ever watched the first episode of Futurama titled Space Pilot 3000, you will see Philip J. Fry bump his head and enter into a state of cryogenic freezing for 1,000 years. This entire process is simplified by Fry falling into the cryogenic chamber and being frozen with the setting set to 1,000 years. Fry simply wakes up in the future. This is an interpretation of the events in the mind of Philip J. Fry. Fry's body could have been frozen in 1999, however, Fry's heart would have had to stop beating. Fry's family would have decided to attempt to preserve Fry's life by the cryogenic freezing. In short, Philip J. Fry and Homer Simpson would both have their minds struggling for consciousness in differing states of sleep. In the subconscious brain of a 20-something, he struggles to maintain a connection to life by imagining that he is living in a futuristic world in which all of his childhood dreams are a reality. In Homer's brain, he is still connected to his family and living in a world where everyone stays the same age, even as the years pass. The common connection between Fry and Simpson is the robot Bender. In Space Pilot 3000, Bender gives Fry the option of the suicide machine, which will instantly take Fry to his next stage of life, which would be death. Fry chooses to live, and Bender becomes the constant companion in case the decision comes up again. This theory would make Bender something of a supernatural agent who ferries souls to their eventual next state. Bender meets them when they are still in a state of spiritual or conscious limbo. In the Simpsons Futurama crossover episode titled Simpsonorama, Bender actually winds up in the Simpsons' basement. Homer is shown tending to Bender. This is important because Bender is now a constant companion to Homer Simpson as well. If Bender's purpose in the universe is to care for people in limbo states between life and death, then Bender's involvement in the lives of Homer Simpson and Philip Fry makes perfect sense. Number 6. Homer did wake up once. The Simpsons enjoys inverting the traditional rules of series television. In this vein, The Simpsons may have given away a significant advance in their plot during a seemingly meaningless clip show. The 77th episode of The Simpsons is titled So It's Come to This, a Simpsons clip show. The plot of the show involves Bart putting Homer into a coma with an April Fool's prank gone wrong. Specifically, Bart shakes a beer can in a pain shaker. When Homer opens the can, the resulting explosion hospitalizes him. The episode is mostly recycled footage while the family waits for Homer to wake up. The episode does feature a longer scene of Homer going to the hospital after the leap attempt at Springfield Gorge. The longer scene features completely new animation made specifically for the show. The longer animation shifts the focus of events back to Bart the Daredevil. The episode also shows Bart tearfully confessing that it was his fault that Homer is in the hospital. Homer comes out of the hospital and starts to choke Bart. Homer is told that he has been in a coma and lost part of his brain function. The beer can incident could have been imagined by Homer. The tearful confession and Homer waking up could have been real. As with the example of the firefighter, Homer would have slipped back into the coma after the brief period of lucidity. The point of the show is the one force ultimately powerful enough to wake Homer up would be the love of his son. These events may also include that Bart is making a concerted effort to improve himself out of remorse for his father's situation. Number 5. The occasional glimpse into the future. There are times in which The Simpsons shows the years passing naturally and the children growing up. In most cases, these episodes seem to reflect Homer's fears of being a mostly absent father. In Lisa's wedding, Lisa nearly marries a man who resents everything about The Simpsons. Lisa does eventually call off the wedding because her fiancé cannot accept her family. The episode underscores Homer's subconscious fear that Lisa will eventually disconnect from the family altogether. Lisa's wedding also shows a hope that Lisa will not disconnect from her family, even if the opportunity arises. The episode Itchy and Scratchy, the movie, highlights Homer's fear that a lack of discipline is hampering Bart's development as a human being. The episode shows Bart being disciplined by not being able to watch a highly anticipated movie. Homer follows through on the discipline. The result is that Bart winds up becoming the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court in 2032. The eventual fate of Bart is a continual source of worry for Homer. This concern might also be what is keeping Homer alive. The episode Days of Future seems to highlight all of Homer's fears about his family. In this episode, Homer is a near immortal surviving through a variety of clones as well as living in a virtual reality. Homer is even eventually given a robot body to ensure his immortality. There is no amount of death or destruction which will separate Homer from his family. However, none of their lives seem to be improved by Homer's constant presence. Homer and Marge split up. Lisa winds up married to a zombie millhouse. Bart is divorced, separated from his family, and in a low-paying job. This episode may represent Homer's thought process at a crossroads, wondering about his importance to his own family. The fantasy would be indicative of a long period of separation from his family. In his coma state, Homer does not actually know what happened to his family. These episodes seem to represent Homer's intense fear of what might be happening. Number 4. The Simpsons establishes definite time frames. The great riddle of The Simpsons is that the episodes take place in a contemporary time while no one actually ages. These time frames are further complicated by the fact that The Simpsons clearly establishes dates for Homer and Marge's courtship, as well as all 3 of the births of the children. The episode I Married Marge establishes that Bart's conception took place while The Empire Strikes Back was in its original theatrical run. This time frame puts Bart's conception between May the 21st, 1980 and August the 14th, 1980. This means that Bart Simpson was born between February and April in the year 1981. The episode Lisa's First Word establishes Lisa as being a baby during the 1984 Summer Olympic Games in Los Angeles. The opening ceremony for those Olympic Games was on July the 28th, 1984, and the closing ceremonies took place on August the 12th. In present day, both Bart and Lisa would be in their 30s. The events surrounding Maggie Simpson's birth are shown in the episode, and Maggie makes 3, and the time frame establishes Maggie's birth around 1990. This is interesting because that birth means that the Simpsons shown in the Tracey Ullman Show shorts were depicting a family slightly in the future. The time frames established also mean that the early Simpsons shows were always showing the same year. Bart the Daredevil was released in December of 1990, however the events of that episode would have technically taken place in 1991. This means that apart from the show's perspective, everyone is always the age that they were in 1991. Bart is 10 years old perpetually. The years move, but the visualization has to remain in 1991. That means that the years are moving, but the ages stay the same. This seeming paradox could be explained if the point of view was from the subconscious of someone who was in a coma and could not see people age, but could feel the years passing. There are very few other ways in which the series makes sense. Number 3. Treehouse of Horror. Have you ever wondered why the Treehouse of Horror would be a yearly event of the Simpson family? The answer could possibly lie in the fact that the first Treehouse of Horror actually predates Bart the Daredevil. In the first Treehouse of Horror, Homer is actually outside the treehouse, listening in on his children. This event would have occurred about a month and a half before the fateful events of Bart the Daredevil. The memory of Homer listening in on those initial treehouse stories could have established a yearly Halloween tradition of going to the hospital and telling Homer scary stories. The episodes that we see could be Homer's imaginings of the stories in his mind. Halloween is not the only time that the family read directly to Homer, though. The family has also been known to read to Homer from the Bible, as well as American legends and classical works of literature. Homer is starting to realize that his present family may not be the family which he knows. In the Treehouse of Horror 25 segment, The Others, the Simpsons from the Tracey Ullman Show encounter the present-day Simpsons. This convergence may represent how the family has evolved in his mind during the time of Homer's coma. Number 2. The Couch Gags. The subtle shift between The Simpsons taking place in the real world and The Simpsons being a representation of Homer's subconscious mind while in a coma may be the couch gags. Homer's greatest desire is to stay in touch with his family. Every episode starts with Homer sitting alongside his family on the couch. Homer sitting with his family watching television on the couch might be his favorite memory. In the episodes preceding Bart the Daredevil, the couch gags are all possible. Granted, the couch gag on Bart Gets an F is improbable, with the family falling through the floor on the couch. However, it's not entirely impossible. In episode 40, titled Homer Defined, there is a space alien shown sitting down on the couch. Later couch gags would show a monster eating the family, as well as the Simpsons finding the Flintstones sitting on the couch. As the years pass, the couch gags demonstrate that Homer's ability to connect with reality is deteriorating. Homer does not see that he's in a hospital bed. Homer imagines that he is home on his couch. Homer also constantly has television playing in the background. Homer's family being around means that Krusty the Clown, as well as the Itchy and Scratchy Show, are staples of television shown in Homer's hospital room. As the lines between reality and televised inspired madness have blurred, Homer's desire to stay connected to his family grew more intense. The struggle led to increasingly fantastic couch gags. Number 1. How the series may end. When it comes to a series finale, there is often very little middle ground in fans' minds. There are admitted misfires such as the Seinfeld finale, as well as masterpieces like the Newhart finale. In the Newhart finale, the entire show was revealed to be a dream by Bob Newhart's character in the earlier The Bob Newhart Show. Ideally, the last episode of The Simpsons would feature Homer being given one last chance to decide between moving on to an afterlife and waking up to a world that he has not known for decades. The trial for the fate of Homer would feature Bender arguing for him to move on and a 10-year-old Bart begging him to wake up. In the end, Homer would wake up and see his family. He would see his children grown up. He would see Marge had waited for him all those years. He would see his grandkids. If they wanted to loop it all the way back, Homer would wake up as a Christmas miracle. This may not be the best way to end the series, but it probably wouldn't be the worst episode ever. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do give us a thumbs up below, and don't forget to subscribe. Brand new videos just like this every day of the week. Also, if you're looking for something else to watch right now, why not check out one of the other videos linked to on the screen now. And as always, thank you for watching.